Hello, everyone. You probably know or recognize me. I am Dr. Summer Sherland, one of the faculty sponsors and founders of the South Phoenix Oral History Project. So today I'm going to show you how to cut and edit your videos for your website. Some of you who are watching this might be students enrolled in one of my classes. Maybe you're a digital humanities or digital storytelling student, or maybe you are an external researcher who's doing some work for us at the South Phoenix Oral History Project. Either way, welcome, and I'm looking forward to showing you how to actually embed videos. You're not going to actually embed, but create the videos that are going to be embedded on our website. So I'm going to walk you through this, and the first thing I want to direct your attention to is there is a document that if you're doing this work for us, you've already been given the link to this document. So you probably have already seen some of this material. This is our SPOH tutorial, editing and labeling video or audio clips. I'll be showing you the Google Drive version or the Google Doc version. You may have this as a PDF. It's the same document. So welcome to this workshop, and I want to point you to a few resources. If you're looking at this video now, you already have the link to the video tutorial. I'm creating it as we speak, so there's no link to it right here, but there will be on the document that you are looking at. Podcast episodes. So we have a podcast called the More and More Everyday Podcast, and that's because we do every spring, we do some sort of daily challenge or daily task that gets aligned with our podcast series. So if you're interested in the curation side, what happens after an interview for an oral history project, here are several podcast episodes where we cover that sort of after the interview curation and archiving process. And if you're interested in that or you want to get some more information up front, I would encourage you to check out any one of these episodes. Episodes are about 10 minutes long, and they end with a challenge, something you can go and try to do to improve your skills as an oral historian. So those are all relevant and related to the work we're going to be doing today, but today's video is truly a step-by-step guide, and it is editing and labeling. This particular video is for video clips only. Now, if you're doing an audio clip, let's say you have an interview where the narrator only did an audio exchange with us, the steps will be incredibly similar, but not exactly precise. So we will have a separate video for those of you who are doing audio clips instead, but we'll begin with video today. So, before we even begin with the step-by-step, I'm going to show you what your work is going to ultimately help create. This is the South Phoenix Oral History Project's website, a student-led initiative to capture and preserve the history of South Phoenix, Arizona. And you can explore our archives or get involved or do some historic tours, etc. But essentially, our signature collection is right here, the South Phoenix and SMCC Memories. That's our signature collection, all the oral histories that we conduct of people in our community live and land here. You can see that all of our narrators, if they are hyperlinked, are a different color. If they're black or gray, that means they're in process. And so let's take a look at an example of particularly what your narrator's page will ultimately look like once we do some of this editing and embedding. So one of my favorite people to reference is Dolly Aguirre, and it's great because she's the very first person. You can see each one of our narrators has a profile like Dolly's, where it has her name, a brief description of who she is to the community, hopefully an older or historical headshot, if not a screen grab for the interview itself, and then a short story about that narrator's life and their contributions to our community. One of the things we also try to do is include 2 to 3 embeds, video or audio, from the interview itself. We do not publish full interviews online, but we do provide clips. So here's an example of Dolly Aguirre's profile and some of the clips that we've selected for her interview. You can see that she was interviewed with Dr. Richard Morales Sr. as well at the same time. So you're going to be creating content so that your page looks like this as well. So today we're going to look at Yvette Espinosa and her profile page And we're gonna actually cut video from her interview so that you can see what will happen. So just like Dolly's, we have Yvette's name here and a brief, summary of what she is and what she does at South Mountain or in the South Phoenix community, a headshot. And Yvette Espinosa is the co-owner of this content. So if she ever wants to add photos or information, she can submit that information to us, and we're happy to oblige. Now you'll notice that the students who created Yvette Espinosa's profile have suggested video clips from her interview for us to use on the web. And the students have also created content that helps us to find those videos really easily. So take a look at whatever narrator page you are working on. Either you have your own narrator, you've written their story, and you've identified clips that you want to use, or like in the case of Yvette, the story's already been written, the interview's already been conducted. All we need to do today now is actually cut these clips so we can embed them on the website. So you can see it says future video clip, encouragement to the new generation, and the timestamp. That's what the students want me to do. They want us to find this clip, and then they give me the timestamp, and they want me to embed it here in the website. So it looks like Yvette's has 3, is that right? 1, 2, and 3 clips that the students suggest. So I'm going to show you how to find those clips, how to download the interview first, then find the clips and edit them on your own device, and then save them to the Google Drive in today's video tutorial. So each of you has been given access to your narrators folder in our digital archive, which is on the back end. It looks a lot, well, it is a Google Drive, right? So here we have Yvette Espinosa's story and Yvette Espinosa's interview. Now, one thing that's unique about Yvette's story and her work is that the students who conducted this interview did not complete an index for whatever reason, right? There may be a reason that it was the group, they weren't assigned an index, or it just wasn't something that they were expected to do. So that might cause a little bit of a trigger, of a hiccup for us, but I want to show you how to get through that no problem. In the case of another interview, you may have an index, which I'll show you what that looks like before we proceed. Let's say you are, let's go back to Dolly Aguirre and Richard Morales. Each one of their interviews contains an index. The students have actually watched the full interview after they conducted it and then created timestamps, right? Timestamp 127. The title is Childhood Challenges, partial transcript, what the narrator is saying when that segment begins, keywords, synopsis, and GPS coordinates if necessary. So if you have someone like Dolly or Richard Morales, go ahead and look for the index in your Google folder. But we don't. Professor Espinosa's, for whatever reason, her profile doesn't contain an index. That's not a problem. All right, so let's take a look at what we're supposed to do. Okay, before you begin, verify your editing software. I use the simplest and easiest editorial software I can find. Some of you might like Adobe Premiere or iMovie, etc., but I prefer just regular Windows Media sort of photo. I think it's just window media photos, and I'll show you what that looks like. So figure out what it is that you want to work with, and we'll go from there. The next step is download the interview of the MP4 to your computer or device. You will be editing on your own device. You will not be editing within the Google Drive. You don't have permissions to change or edit any content within our Google Drive. You only have permissions to view. So we want to do this one because we don't want to do the backup. That's an M4A, that's an audio file. We want to do this MP4 of her full interview. So let's collect it, or let's select it. Where's my download feature? Download. Here we go. All right, I took a little break because it does take some time for this large of a file to download to my device, as it probably will be a little bit time consuming for you as well. But the time has lapsed and we are back. So now that you've downloaded the MP4 to your computer or your device, you are going to now begin clipping the interview for your narrator. So you'll open the interview in your selected editing software, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Because the other thing you'll want to do, we've already referenced this a little bit, is find the profile or biographical story on your narrator, because their story and the work the students or the researchers have done is going to point you to which clips you're going to create in the video. There's no reason to create multiple clips. You're just going to create the clips that have been suggested, and you're going to use your best judgment to make sure those clips are done in a professional and visually interesting way. So like I said, each profile on the web should feature 2 to 3 clips, and these clips have already been suggested by the students or researchers who already wrote the story. Now, one caveat is that you may actually be the person writing the story, right? You may be a researcher who's working on a full profile for somebody, or you're a student who's doing this as part of a digital storytelling or digital humanities project as well. And so if you created the story and you've suggested the clips, you're in great shape. You already know what those clips are. But you might be, many of you will be editing to a complete story. So most of those stories are on the web. Remember, these are the 3 video clips that the students who wrote Yvette's story have suggested. So you're just going to locate this so you know where to point your video to. If there's no story yet on the web, you can find it in the Google Drive. Wherever your narrator's folder is, and remember, you've been given permissions to their folder, you should be able to find their story somewhere in their folder. So you'll notice this says Yvette Espinosa Final Story Draft or Yvette Espinosa Story. They're the same thing, they've just been labeled differently based on our sequencing and our labeling criteria. So again, here's the same story. It's probably been rewritten a little bit for the web. And you notice that it says insert and the timestamp, right? So those are your 2 places to look for your stories for the video editing that you're going to be doing. You can also locate that interview index like I showed you previously. So maybe you want to find the full index, which has an entire index of like 15 to 20 segments for the full interview. And that's going to be up to you as a researcher. So each interview is also indexed by students and researchers. They are stored in the Google Drive under your narrators, in your narrators folder, and you can also find them on the website. So if you can't find it in the Google Drive, like in the case with Yvette, there is no index for her yet, but let's say you're looking at Rod Ambrose, right? You scroll all the way to the bottom, and here is Rod Ambrose's index. So any researcher out there in the world who wants to know, what Rod talked about in his interview can find it in his index. So you can find the index or the timestamps, whichever thing works best for you and your clips. I just use the story because why do more work for yourself, right? Why create more work? Okay, so we've got our story. We've got our suggested clips, and we've downloaded our MP4. So now you're going to begin cutting your clips for the interview, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, welcome back everybody. I went ahead and paused my video while Yvette's full interview was being downloaded. There's about 500 megabytes of data in this MP4, so it took about 10 minutes for Yvette's interview to download. I'm assuming it'll take about the same amount of time for you to download your full interviews as well. So I'm going to show you now how to edit a full interview and clip it, just create little clips from the interview that align with whatever it is in the story that the students think should be illustrated from that interview. So the very easiest software I use, because I'm a PC person, is I just use Microsoft Photos. I just click on the file and it opens automatically in Photos. And you can see here I am, and here's Yvette, and actually we're joined later by another colleague of ours, Dr. Travis May. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this a little bit because I'm going to go back to our checklist. So here you are in step 5, begin cutting clips from the interview. Well, how do you know what clips to cut? Remember, you're doing that based on the biographical story or the profile that the students have already created. So in Yvette's case, the students have suggested a couple different clips. And earlier I showed you a version of Yvette Espinosa's profile that has these three icons, right? Future video clip here, future video clip there. Well, now all of a sudden there's the actual video clip is here. And I'm going to show you what it looks like now that it's in the website.
First real job outside of research, right? Because I've done, I didn't mention this earlier.
So how did we get from here, this little icon, to here? That is what you're going to do with us today. So let's go back to the students. The student suggestion previously was they said there was something like, and we have their story draft saved here, and it's been updated on the website since, but they said right here, something about from about minute 46 to minute 49, Travis May asks the question, how has South Mountain changed you over those 14 years here? And we went from this little tag to whatever we were able to create for this particular moment in Yvette's interview. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So if you're like me and you're using Microsoft Photos, you know that this little blue bar right here kind of helps us to advance and to go backwards in time with the interview itself, but it doesn't actually allow us to cut or delete or change the video itself. You have to be in edit to do that first. So if you look down here on this little icon that looks like a pencil, you can click edit in photos, and that's exactly what I do. And I choose trim because all we're trying to do is trim out little pieces of this interview. You're not going to draw, you're not going to create a video, you're not saving a photo, you're just trying to cut a moment in the interview. And here you go. So down at the bottom of your screen, if you're using photos like me, you'll see three little buttons. You'll see this dot here, which is the beginning of the clip, this dot here, which is the end of the clip, and this blue dot, which really helps us to advance throughout the interview, right? And remember, the students said that right around 49 minutes is when Yvette says something about, I think it was actually earlier than that. We'll go back and check. She says something about how South Mountain has changed for her, or changed her rather. So let's go back to her story. The students say at 46:40 minutes, Dr. May asks this question and then Yvette later answers it. Now, one of the things you get to do as an editor is to decide when the clip begins and when it ends. Sometimes the students are going to be really clear and they're going to be really good about directing you to the perfect moment. But sometimes it doesn't quite work right where they think. So the students say 46:50. Let's see what happens.
Oh, go ahead, Travis.
I was going to say, how has South changed you over those 14 years? When you first started, you came in with fresh eyes. You've been here 14 years. You've seen a lot. How has it changed you?
When I started at South,
So you hear how Yvette begins by saying, when I started at South? I think that means that we don't need Travis's question. She already is introducing the topic on her own. So I believe she starts talking at 47:02 maybe? 47:03. So if you pause right in the moment where you think the clip begins, that blue dot stays right where you want it. And if you advance the white dot to meet the blue dot where that little bar is, that's where your clip will begin.
When I started at South, it was my first real job outside of research, right?
And then she talks about her experiences until about minute 49:50. So let's take a look and see what happens at 49:50. So you take this white bar and you bring it down to where you think maybe she's about done. And let's go a little bit further than 49:50. Let's go to 49. Yeah, let's take it right to 49:50. And see, I don't want that in there, right? That's me, and that's me talking, and we don't want to hear her or hear me. We want to hear her. So let's pause it right here and see what happens at 49:14.
Good or bad are going to have repercussions on our students and our students as a whole, not just the ones in my classroom. And so I think that also just having an awareness of that there's a larger picture beyond the classroom has really evolved since I first started teaching too.
So that sheet ends at 49:34. This is where it can get a little tricky with Microsoft Photos, is that sometimes when you move this button, it moves the other button. So 49:34 4 is really when she kind of stopped, right? Was that right?
Not just the ones in my classroom. And so I think that also just having an awareness of that there's a larger picture beyond the classroom has really evolved since I first started teaching too.
Yeah. So that's a perfect clip. And what you can do is just go back and forth with this blue dot to make sure that you think that the moment begins and ends in the right part, right? In the right moment. So let's say that you've got your clip done. You've edited it down. You have the perfect amount of time. You don't want your clip to be more than about 2 minutes long. Now you're going to save it. And I want to show you how to save it exactly and precisely as we ask you to. You're going to save each clip separately. You're going to do your best to match the name of the clip to the corresponding name in the index. Well, Yvette Espinosa doesn't have an index, but the students do give us a little bit of a transcript here, right? So they say, Travis May asks the question, how has South Mountain changed you over these 14 years? They say that's what we should title that clip. Well, that's not quite a perfect clip title, but it's close. It's more of a synopsis. Maybe just right here is the title. How has South Mountain changed you? Right? Maybe that's a good title. The reason you're going to want to try and match your clips and the title of your clips almost precisely to what the students have titled the clips is it helps future researchers, right, to figure out where in the interview this conversation is being had. So if you imagine that a future researcher years from now is trying to investigate a certain topic about the history of South Phoenix, and they're learning about, a particular aspect of South Phoenix, they're going to want to know in every one of these hour to hour and a half long interviews where that aspect is being discussed. So the better you can match the clip title to the name the students have given it in the index or their story, the clearer it will be down the road. One other thing to point out to you, so you're going to do your best to match the name of the clip, but you're also going to save the clip in a specific format. We do not use special punctuation, no colons, semicolons, or commas. Try to use only periods. And here's how you're going to label each clip. First name, period, last name, period, first initial, period. Minute in the interview, period, second in the interview period, segment title, right? So here's a great example. Nakagawa K, 8 minutes, 37 seconds, kids on the farm. Again, no punctuation other than periods. And we use something called camel casing, which looks like a camel, right? No spaces in between words, but you capitalize each new word. This is because different computer program systems recognize different labeling or sequencing programs or approaches. Again, this has to do with future researchers. If they want to know about a particular aspect in an interview, we want them to know that this narrator said this during this exact moment in the interview. So even though you're creating a clip, you're still tagging the moment in the interview where it occurred. So remember, we're editing this, and we think that this clip begins at 47. I actually think we don't have it at 47:01. 47:03 is when this clip begins. So you're going to click Save As, and your computer's going to save it automatically, but you need to save it as something different. Remember, last name, period, first initial, period, moment in the interview, 47 minutes and 33 seconds, and then the title, How South Mountain Changed Me or You. Either one is fine. So I'll say me because she's our narrator. And then you'll click Save. Okay? Next, I'm going to show you what to do with your clips once you've completed all of the clipping for your entire interview. I'm going to show you how to upload those to your Google folder and then what we do with those clips upon completion. All right. So here we are, we're back in Yvette Espinosa's narrator folder, and let's go ahead and upload her clip that we just created. You're gonna upload it into the Google folder, in her folder. Don't just put it anywhere in the Google Drive, only put it in your narrators folder. And I'm gonna pause the recording and let the time lapse go so that you can see what it looks like once it's in your folder. All right, so I went ahead and did a time lapse. So I paused my recording while the other recording, Yvette's clip that we just created together, is being uploaded into her Google folder in our drive, her narrator folder. So you can see it's almost done. There's probably just a few more minutes left, maybe 1 or 2. And once it's done, it will populate here in her narrator folder. Now, that's where your work is over. You're done once you have shared all of your clips with us. So in our situation, there were 3 clips we were meant to create, right? Well, we've created 1. And now there's 2 more to do: encouragement to the new generation and South Phoenix Community Requests a College. This is a moment in which Yvette shares some of her research about the founding of South Mountain Community College. So those are the 2 clips that we still have yet to do. And I won't walk you through doing those because you can always rewind and watch how I did the first one in order to be ready to do your other clips. So once you've uploaded all of your clips into your narrators folder, your work is done and you're able to move on to your next steps. But I want to show you what happens on our end so you can see how your work is useful to future generations and future scholars. Okay, see how it's here in the drive? That's fantastic. Now we have the clips that will live in the website about Yvette. So you can see where there once was this little icon, there is now a YouTube embed, and I'll show you how that happened. While we were uploading the clip that we just created about how South Mountain Community College impacted or affected Yvette Espinosa, I also shared that clip to YouTube. You won't need to do this, but I did it. So you can see what happens with your clips. I take your clip and I put it into our YouTube channel, and then I embed it directly into her website. So that's how your work, where you're going to take us from, you're going to take us from this, which is an image and a brief story, to something more dynamic, like, I'll show you another one just so you have a good example of somebody different. You're going to go from just an image and a brief story to a dynamic story with embedded videos through your work, through the audio and video editing that you just did with me. So if you don't have a PC, if you have an Apple product, you probably can use a different software program, but it's going to be very similar. You just want to try and find a trim feature or a way to cut the video down. You don't have to do any additional editing. So for instance, you might be like, wait, where did we get this little logo? I do that on my end. You don't need to worry about embedding or adding the logo to your video that you're creating of your narrator. So that's how we are able to take Yvette Espinosa's story and make it more interactive and visually interesting. So thank you again for your work with the South Phoenix Oral History Project. I look forward to seeing what you put together.